Good evening, my friends! The Pittsburgh Steelers may still be weeks away from training camp, but one of the biggest debates surrounding this team is already taking shape, and it could have a major impact on how the entire 2026 season unfolds. The focus right now is not on the established veterans, it is not even on some of the star players expected to lead this roster. Instead, the conversation centers around a crucial position that every championship contender must have figured out: quarterback depth. Aaron Rodgers is projected to enter the season as the starting quarterback, and while his experience and leadership bring immediate credibility to the offense, there is an undeniable reality that cannot be ignored. Rodgers has dealt with injuries in each of the last 4 seasons. Whether those injuries were minor or significant, the fact remains that Pittsburgh must be prepared for the possibility that he could miss time during the season. That is where one of the most fascinating battles of the offseason begins. According to the latest roster projections coming out after OTAs, Will Howard is emerging as the favorite to become the Steelers' primary backup quarterback. This is a significant development because entering the offseason, many believed Mason Rudolph's experience would give him a clear advantage. Rudolph has already proven that he can step into games and help Pittsburgh win. He understands the organization, knows the expectations, and has delivered in difficult situations before. However, reports coming from the offseason program suggest that Will Howard has been making a strong impression. Coaches have reportedly been pleased with how quickly he is learning the offense, how comfortable he looks operating the system, and how sharp he has appeared during practices. The challenge ahead for Howard is straightforward but demanding. He must convince the coaching staff that if Rodgers were forced to miss 2 or 3 games, he could keep the Steelers competitive in a season where expectations are extremely high. That is not a small responsibility. A backup quarterback on a rebuilding team serves one purpose. A backup quarterback on a team trying to compete immediately serves another. Pittsburgh needs someone they trust to help preserve a winning season if adversity strikes. At this moment, the belief is that Howard has a legitimate opportunity to earn that trust. Meanwhile, another quarterback remains part of the long-term picture. Drew Aller is projected as the developmental third quarterback on the roster. The expectation is not that Aller will see meaningful game action this season. Instead, the organization appears focused on allowing him to learn, grow, and develop behind experienced players while preparing for future opportunities. While the quarterback room will receive plenty of attention, the running back competition could become one of the most intense position battles of training camp. The current projection includes 4 running backs making the final roster: Jaylen Warren, Rico Dowdle, Caleb Johnson, and Eli Heidenreich. The most interesting name in that group may be Heidenreich. His path to a roster spot appears tied directly to special teams. Travis Homer remains one of the most respected special teams contributors on the roster, and was brought in largely because of that role. But Heidenreich offers versatility that extends beyond special teams. He has the potential to contribute offensively in multiple ways, giving coaches additional flexibility when building weekly game plans. Because of that versatility, Heidenreich may hold a slight edge if he can prove he belongs alongside Homer in the kicking game. What makes this battle especially intriguing is that there is no obvious answer right now. Depending on how training camp unfolds, any one of several players could find themselves on the outside looking in when final cuts arrive. Another storyline worth monitoring involves Caleb Johnson. While he currently projects to make the roster, there are questions about his long-term fit and future within the organization. If another team sees significant value in his skill set, especially a team looking for help in a run-heavy offensive system, his name could become involved in trade discussions before the regular season begins. Moving to the receiving core, the projected group paints a picture of an offense with multiple layers. DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman Jr. are expected to headline the unit, while Jeremy Bernard and Roman Wilson provide additional options in the receiving rotation. Ben Skowronek's value remains tied to his blocking ability and special teams contributions, while Caden Legion is projected to earn a role because of his return capabilities. That combination gives the Steelers a mix of size, physicality, versatility, and special teams value that could prove important throughout a long season. The tight end room appears much more straightforward. Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington remain central figures at the position, while Riley Nowakowski is currently projected to secure the 3rd spot. However, training camp could still create opportunities for players like Robert Tonyan to make a serious push for consideration if they perform at a high level. As attention shifts toward the offensive line, one development stands out above all others. Broderick Jones is not currently projected to occupy a spot on the active roster at the beginning of the season. The reasoning is tied to his recovery process. After dealing with a neck injury during the offseason, Jones reportedly lost significant weight because he was unable to maintain his normal training routine. For an NFL offensive lineman, weight and strength are critical factors, and until he returns to the necessary physical condition, questions will remain about his availability. Rather than moving on from him entirely, the expectation is that Pittsburgh could use a reserve designation that would allow him to continue recovering while potentially returning later in the season. If that scenario unfolds, it would represent one of the most surprising roster developments heading into training camp. And when you look at everything happening across the roster, from the quarterback competition to the running back battle to the uncertainty surrounding key offensive line depth, it becomes clear that the Steelers still have several major decisions ahead before the final roster is set. The biggest question may be this: if training camp started tomorrow, would you trust Will Howard to be the Steelers' backup quarterback in a season where one injury to Aaron Rodgers could change everything? The uncertainty surrounding Broderick Jones is only one piece of a much larger puzzle, because once you move to the defensive side of the football, the Steelers appear to have some difficult roster decisions waiting for them as well. One of the most interesting developments involves the defensive line rotation. The projected core group consists of Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton, Sebastian Joseph Day, and Derek Tuska. On paper, that gives Pittsburgh a blend of veteran leadership, developing talent, and rotational depth that should allow the defense to remain competitive in the trenches throughout the season. Of course, everyone knows that Cam Hayward remains the emotional leader of this defense. Even as younger players continue to emerge, his presence remains one of the most important elements of the Steelers' identity. Meanwhile, Keanu Benton continues to be viewed as a player capable of taking another major step forward as his role expands. Behind those primary contributors, however, the competition becomes much more intense. Several players are expected to battle for limited roster spots, and one name drawing attention is Quincy Rush. He is projected to survive final cuts, but there is no guarantee. The pressure will be on him to perform during training camp and the preseason. The projection suggests that Roche could earn a spot ahead of Dean Lowry and Logan Lee, but that battle is far from decided. Every year there are players who arrive at camp fighting for their NFL future, and Roche appears to be entering exactly that type of situation. The edge rusher position, on the other hand, may be one of the strongest areas on the entire roster. TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig, and Jack Sawyer form a group that could compete with virtually any outside linebacker unit in football. There are very few teams around the league capable of matching that combination of production, experience, athleticism, and pass rushing ability. The presence of 4 legitimate contributors creates tremendous flexibility for the coaching staff. It also provides protection against injuries over the course of a 17-game season, something every contender needs if they hope to make a deep playoff run. At inside linebacker, the picture appears equally stable. Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson are expected to lead the group, while Malik Harrison, Cole Holcomb, and Carson Brunner provide additional depth. Unlike some of the other positions on the roster, there are very few surprises here. The coaching staff appears comfortable with this group heading into camp, and barring injuries, major changes seem unlikely. But once the conversation reaches the secondary, things become much more fascinating. The projected cornerback room includes Joey Porter Jr., Jamel Dean, Jalen Ramsey, Brandon Eccles, Asante Samuel Jr., and rookie Dalen Everett. That collection of talent has the potential to completely transform the defense. Joey Porter Jr. continues to develop into one of the most important young defenders on the roster. Jalen Ramsey brings experience, versatility, and physicality. Jamel Dean adds another proven option on the outside. Meanwhile, Asante Samuel Jr. and Brandon Eccles provide depth that many teams around the league would gladly welcome. Then there is Dalen Everett, the rookie from Georgia, who will have an opportunity to prove he belongs immediately. If even a few of these players perform at the level Pittsburgh expects, the secondary could become one of the strengths of the entire football team. However, the safety position may ultimately become one of the biggest storylines of training camp. The projection includes a surprising possibility. A safety who is not currently on the roster could eventually make the team. The reason centers around Darnell Savage. There are concerns about both his recent performance and his health. Over the last several seasons, consistency has been an issue, and injuries have prevented him from building momentum. Because of that, there is growing speculation that Pittsburgh could look elsewhere if Savage struggles during training camp. One potential solution mentioned is Donovan Wilson. Wilson's experience, familiarity with defensive concepts connected to members of the coaching staff, and history as a starter make him an intriguing possibility. If Pittsburgh believes they need additional reliability at the position, bringing in a veteran like Wilson could become a realistic option before the regular season begins. That possibility becomes even more important when considering the roles expected from Jaquan Brisker and Deshaun Elliott. The Steelers want flexibility in their secondary. They want to keep Jalen Ramsey available for specialized assignments, including the important big nickel role that is expected to be a major part of the defensive structure. Having dependable safety depth would allow the coaching staff to maintain that flexibility without constantly reshuffling responsibilities. Special teams, meanwhile, appear relatively settled. Chris Boswell remains one of the most trusted kickers in football. Cameron Johnston is projected to handle punting duties, while Christian Kuntz continues in his role as long snapper. Those positions may not generate headlines, but championship teams understand how critical special teams can be in close games. Pittsburgh has long valued consistency in that phase of the game, and there is little reason to expect significant changes there. Perhaps the most revealing part of the projection comes when examining the players who could be fighting for practice squad spots rather than active roster positions. Mason Rudolph stands out immediately. Despite his experience and history with the organization, the projection suggests he could find himself competing for a practice squad role if Will Howard secures the backup quarterback position. While another team could certainly show interest in Rudolph, Pittsburgh would likely welcome the opportunity to keep him in the building as experienced insurance. Travis Homer is another player who could become a difficult roster cut because of his special teams value. Robert Tonyan, Ryan McCollum, Dean Lowry, Logan Lee, Jack Driscoll, Anthony Perry, Max Harmon, and Sebastian Castro are among the additional names projected as possible practice squad candidates. What makes all of this so compelling is that training camp has not even begun yet. Every year, unexpected players emerge. Every year, preseason performances change opinions. Every year, roster projections get challenged by realities nobody saw coming. Right now, the Steelers appear to have a strong foundation, but several key battles remain unresolved. The backup quarterback competition, the running back decisions, the offensive line situation involving Broderick Jones, the battle for defensive depth, and the questions surrounding the safety position could all reshape the final roster before week 1 arrives. The next few weeks may determine not only who makes the team, but